bring in our buddy Ken
Ken the
Rosenthal
rules.
joins us right now. Oh, and let's do our Charlotte's Web player access, sponsored by Recreate. And let's touch on the player side here first, real quick. Ken, did you see that yesterday?
I read about it. I didn't actually see it.
Okay. Well, I think AJ.
But Torey Lovello said something really pertinent. He said that Acuna did nothing wrong, and that the pitcher has to account for that. So to me, that's end of story. And as you said, Scott, what he was doing was effective, and if it works, it works. Not cheating, not doing anything illicit. It's fine.
I think a lot of people are just worried about Acuna in general these days because he wreaks
havoc. As they should be.
As they should be. Exactly. All right, so I have so many directions I want to go. I'm going to give AJ the option. Do you either want to start with like all the trade talk and the teams and everything, or do you want to start with the commissioner getting re-upped?
Commissioner.
Okay, so let's start there. Ken, you and Evan Drellick teamed up to report on how Commissioner Manfred is going to have another term, probably the same as the last few. 5 years, probably $25+ million. So what do you think about it? Because I think the role of the commissioner in baseball has changed. He's making money for the owners, so that's all that matters. So do you think this is the right decision? Not that there's someone that's going to replace him that was in the running, but do you think that he's doing what he should be doing in that role?
He's doing what he should be doing, Scott, as you just mentioned, for the people who employ him, the owners. And to some degree, you're right. The role has shifted over the years. And back in the day, a long time ago, we thought about the commissioner being someone who acts only in the best interests of baseball. And that sort of changed when Bud Selig became commissioner because, of course, he was a former owner. And it became a situation which was not really unlike what it ever was, but the owners run the show. Manfred works for the owners. It's a simple equation. He makes no bones about it, nor really should he. So I can sit here and question this and that and the other thing, and we do, right? We criticize him when we think it's appropriate. But as you said, Scott, he's making money for the owners. The sport is in a better place this year than it's been in a while, and for that, he gets some of the credit, for sure. So they're not going to change it. And I kind of make the analogy to what I discussed earlier this week with regard to Ohtani and Artie Moreno. It's not a perfect analogy, but hear me out. I said earlier this week, the Ohtani decision, my opinion doesn't matter. You guys' opinion doesn't matter. Fans' opinion doesn't matter. Nobody's opinion matters but one man. That's Artie Moreno. With the decision to have Manfred back and extended, it's the same kind of thing. The only opinions that matter are those of the owners. They are apparently satisfied or clearly satisfied with how this is going. So we can sit here and squawk all we want, and we can wonder why he isn't a better public speaker and doesn't handle himself more gracefully at times. We can question certain decisions. That's all fair game. But at the same time, he's not going anywhere, and he's not going anywhere because the owners like him.
So he is about to turn 65. It's his age 65 season. And he will probably run until his age 70 season with this next term coming up. There's something that I call F it mode, where this could be the last run that he has, 5 more years. He might not want to do this again from 70 to 75. Do you think that affects the way that he commissioners at all, where you don't have to take as much shit potentially from everyone else? You can sure make your money, but do you tilt the line a little bit towards legacy and trying to have a more favored reputation in the way that you speak to the media and deal with fans and in the decisions that you make, where you don't have to take shit from, a certain owner 24/7 because you don't have to worry about him reelecting you? Do you think that could tilt at all during this next term?
Scott, that is an excellent question, and I haven't really considered it. But if you think about it and just go by the way he has acted so far, I would say I don't expect much of a change, if any. Now, people can always improve in anything that they do, even at an older age, right? But I don't expect him to change much publicly. I don't expect him to be any less servile is a strong word, but you know what I'm saying with regard to the owners. He is their guy, and I expect him to act in their best interests. I just don't see him deviating from that very much and going off the reservation, so to speak. He is who he is as a commissioner, and he has forged that identity. I just don't see him suddenly becoming a guy who is worried about his legacy with regard to his historical impact on the sport. He does what he does, and I don't know that his feel for the sport is so great anyway. I've never felt that it was so great, and there are people within the sport who feel the same way, executives, etc. So I don't anticipate a change, but what you're saying is definitely interesting to think about. And when he does get reelected, and he will, that's a fair question to ask of him. Hey, what might you do differently now that you have this next term?
Ken, what happens? What's to say he doesn't go the other way? He's already incorporated all these new rules. What's to say he just doesn't go off the reservation and go like the complete other way and be like, I'm putting in robo umps, and I'm putting two bases at first, and I'm, just going crazy with all this and being like, that's my legacy. I changed baseball, and if you don't like it, I'm 70 years old. I don't care anyways.
Well, robo-umps are coming, and it seems to me it's coming with a challenge system, which will not be a complete turnover to the automatic ball strike system, which to me is okay. If we have a situation where there are 5 challenges a game, I kind of would like to see that. AJ, I think as a catcher, you probably would like to see that too, because there are calls that are missed. Now, once you open that Pandora's box, who knows where it goes? That's a conversation for another day. I don't expect him to be much different in that regard either. I don't see him as being suddenly this revolutionary commissioner disrupting the sport in any way he can. He has done some things along the lines of making the sport different. Certainly these rules changes, overdue, but they got there. So he deserves credit for that. During this next period, what we're going to have is another labor agreement. That will be dicey. We're going to have expansion, most likely, and that's going to be something really important for the sport, and perhaps radical realignment going along with that. So there are a number of things that are going to come up that he has to take care of without going off the reservation, for lack of a better phrase.
Before we get to the trades, the one other thing that I hope he tries to make a difference with is tanking. And we'll get to the Orioles in a moment because we were talking about that with Nathan Ruiz earlier. But I hope that they continue to at least show some goodwill on his side of the negotiation table and not make this just a player thing, because it shouldn't be something you negotiate. But unfortunately, when you look at a team like Baltimore, they're playing so well right now. They were a super tank team over the past 5+ years. For a sport that's always looking to expand, you're spending so much money internationally, Ken, all of this, it's like you're missing something right in front of you. When teams tank to that extent and they get rewarded, you miss out on a massive chunk of a fan base. There's like this mini generation of fans that don't follow the sport in a particular area. I really hope that that's one of those things where he says, you know what, I don't need to hear it from the small market owners. I'm going to make some changes like the draft lottery, I think that help to get rid of tanking.
Totally agree. I don't expect he's going to go to that measure or to that extent. And again, it's an ownership question. And will he act in a way that changes the labor agreement meaningfully to stop tanking? Well, we had ideas in the last set of talks. Remember, the owners proposed a salary floor, and they linked it to essentially a harsher series of penalties with regard to the luxury tax. The players were never going to go for that, and it showed that they are really not interested in a salary floor. So they can say, well, we proposed this anti-tanking measure and the players didn't want it. Well, you got to do it in a meaningful way. And Scott, I would like to see the same thing. It's really important. And yes, the Orioles are thriving now, but not all of these teams have succeeded in going backwards. We know the positive examples, the Cubs from 16, the Astros all these years, then the Orioles now. But it's not that easy. And it's years of losing and suffering and, as you mentioned, alienating fans. There are people in Baltimore, and I worked there for many years. I still have family there. They were disaffected by what the Orioles did. And yeah, they'll come back. Fans always come back. That's the beauty of what we do and what we have such passion for with regard to sports. But it's not a healthy thing. and he should recognize it's not a healthy thing. And in the CBA, yes, the lottery helps. It didn't go far enough, as far as I'm concerned, in a universal way to address tanking. The lottery's one element. They could have done other things. But this is the 100 Years' War in baseball, labor versus management, and I expect it to be ugly again the next time we have a go-round.
Ken, we just had Nathan Diaz on from Baltimore and mentioned tanking to him, and now they're good. Are they the number one team that needs to make moves to satisfy their fan base, their players, and make a run? Because for us, Scott and I, we talked about this, the AL is down this year. It's not your typical Yankees, Red Sox, Astros powerhouses that you've had. It's a little bit down. So is this the year where the Orioles say, and the Angelos family and their GM Mike Elias say, we're all in, we're going all in, and we're going to make that move? And I don't want to hear we're ahead of schedule. The schedule is when you're winning. That's your schedule. If you're winning ahead of time, that's even better. That means you did a better job developing than you thought. So are they the one team that needs to make a move to say, look, fans, look, people of Baltimore, we are in and we are going for it?
They should. I don't know that they will.
Gosh, I'm sick of that answer. That's the same answer we got before. I'm sick of that answer.
Being honest.
I know, but I hate that answer.
Well, let me explain. Teams today rarely go all in. They're always hedging for the future, and you can understand that. You can understand why in any given year a team might say, well, if we do this, this, and this, it's going to compromise us down the line. Where the Orioles are different, and I've written this a few times now, they have not just great prospects, they've got duplicates. They have too many players for a 26-man roster going forward. They're not going to be able to keep them all. So, given what you just said, AJ, about the American League being down, and I agree with this totally, you're not going to have many years where the Yankees and Red Sox are in the state that they're in right now. Yes, they should be more aggressive than they normally would. Now, will they? I don't know. I wrote yesterday that if Ohtani becomes available, and I don't believe he will still, but if he does, they should be the team because they have duplicates. They can do this and take a shot. The $10 million that he's going to earn after the deadline shouldn't be prohibitive for any team. And here are the Orioles in this dogfight with Tampa Bay, and in a year in which the Astros are also down, hey, you've got a shot here, and you've got something special going, and why not take that shot? I don't know that it will be Ohtani in the end, and they made a minor trade yesterday. We can get to that, which actually should help them a little bit if Fujinami can translate to what he was doing in Oakland over to Baltimore. But they definitely need to do things, and I expected them, and I thought they would be more active in the offseason. That was the time. They didn't do a whole lot. So they've been hedging, and they've been hedging and hedging and hedging, like a lot of teams do. You're right, AJ. It's time to go.
Here's the thing, Ken, about the hedging and the tanking, and we're holding on to prospects. Win. Because, again, you don't have to go that far back in baseball where every team tried to win every year. And I get, yes, we want to build for the long term. But you know how you also can build for the long term? By going out, if you have a hole, and signing a player to fill that hole instead of waiting on a prospect, an A-ball, 2 years down the road to maybe help you out. Teams used to say, okay, we need a second baseman. There's 5 second basemen on the market. We're going to go sign one of these second basemen because our fans expect us to try to win. Now fans say, oh, we're going to tank for 5 years because it worked for the Cubs. It worked for the Astros. It's working for the Orioles. They haven't won a World Series, but they're climbing. But there's also teams you can look at and say, it didn't work. Pittsburgh.
Absolutely right.
Detroit.
Yeah,
Detroit.
No, absolutely right.
White
Cincinnati
Sox.
Until
Cincinnati,
right now.
Right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of teams. So you can say,
totally agree.
it's great, but what happens when it doesn't work? So if you have a shot and a path, you have to go for it.
I'm with you. And you're not going to get an argument from me on this. And I found it interesting yesterday seeing the comments to the article that I wrote about the Orioles possibly being a player for Ohtani and how they could do it because they have so many prospects and not enough places to play them, all these duplicates. They have the ability to do this and not really harm themselves long term. And the reaction by some fans, and fans have been conditioned to this over the years, and it drives me nuts. We've got all this young talent. We're not trading it. Really? You're not going to play all these guys, folks. They're not all going to make it to the big leagues for the Orioles. So at some point, you've got to cash in some of these guys. And what I'm saying is that over the years, this psychology has come into play in the sport in which fans are comfortable with following the process and developing and trading and keeping the payrolls down. No, you should not be comfortable with that. There is a degree of that has to happen, of course, and especially for the lower revenue teams that aren't in as strong a position financially as the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox. But at the same time, those teams also should be held accountable for their low payrolls and for not trying as hard as they should. They can do better.
Ken, what's going on with the Yanks? And I'm going to say that more in the trade conversation portion because over the last month, Yanks fans are dreaming about who they're going to trade for. We're starting to hit a point where why shouldn't they be involved in the Cardinals, Mets, Padres conversation? If they keep this up coming up to the trade deadline, we might be saying Wandy Peralta, Harrison Bader, maybe Gleyber, even though he's not a free agent coming up after this year. Would the Yankees possibly either A, sell, or B, do the weird thing like AJ referred to earlier, where you kind of buy, you kind of sell, you kind of Red Sox it from last year? Where are we at? Because they look awful, and thinking that Judge is going to save them in a few weeks might not happen, and they might be out of time.
I agree, Scott, and they are at a critical crossroads here. I'm not sure how they're going to do this. I have a hard time believing they're going to sell. I believe the wild card deficit is still only 2.5 games. So if you're the Yankees and you want to think positively, and just hear me out for a minute, you're facing a rather small deficit. You do have Judge coming back, Loaizaga as well. You would think Rodon's going to pitch better. There are some things that you hopefully can count on. But at the same time, where are we going with this? You've already got an older roster. You've got Stanton and LeMahieu and Rizzo, who are not going to be any better next year. And it might be a time for them to do a buy-sell type thing, a retooling of sorts, especially when their payroll is so high. I don't know how you go about that. They're potential free agents. Some of them are interesting, but Severino's not going to bring you what you would have wanted. Ultimately, Bader, frequently injured, good player, but he does get hurt. I don't know. And at the same time, they seem to be at a spot where they were in 2016. Remember when they traded Chapman and Andrew Miller? And those trades at the time were well received. Now, the Chapman trade worked out well. Torres, the Miller trade, not as well. But at the same time, they have to look at some things. And they have to take a hard look at themselves and be realistic. Because right now, it looks awful. It's just a team that has nothing going offensively. And I don't know, even with Judge, if they're going to have so much more going offensively. He can carry them. We saw it last year. He essentially did. And he changes everything. But what if he gets hurt again? And there are all kinds of things that can happen. So they're a really interesting team to watch in the next couple of weeks. I do not expect them to concede, but I do expect them to perhaps try to get younger, better, and cheaper while still improving. And it's a tough line to walk. It's threading the needle, not easy, but they just can't simply go in there as buyers, and I don't believe they can go in there simply as sellers.
So is there pressure then on Brian Cashman like never before? I mean, he's been there for 25 plus years, right? Aaron Boone, we talked about this earlier. Aaron Boone is getting mad now in his press conferences. He used to be happy all the time, every answer positive. And the last few days, if you watch him, he's pissed. He's like, we got to play better. Like, he's feeling it now, which you never could say before. So I just don't know what the move is. And they're going to have to get super creative, I think, to try to do what you're saying to do, get younger, athletic, but also still contend. The problem is they don't have a lot of assets I don't know that people want. I don't know who they have that people are dying to get their hands on. I mean, I can't think. I mean, yeah, of course, Aaron Judge, but he comes with a huge price tag, right?
No, they're not
but
trading
I know,
Judge.
but I'm saying other than him, of other teams, if you're a
I
team.
mentioned them. Wandy, Peralta, Bader, IKF, Gleyber. No, these are small, right?
They're not a move. They're not a move that you look at like a Chapman and you say, we're going to trade Chapman to the Cubs. He's going to bring us back a Gleyber Torres type prospect. So that's where I feel like there might be a 3-team trade. They're going to have to get super creative. And I think this is why, if you talk to Yankees fans, I don't know if they trust Brian Cashman to do this.
A lot of them don't. And you asked me if there's pressure on him. Pressure is a relative term. There's pressure on him from the fan base. They're frustrated. And there have been a lot of moves over the past few years that have not worked out for Brian Cashman. At the same time, it goes back to almost the same conversation we were having about Manfred, about Artie Moreno. There's only one opinion that matters here, and it's Hal Steinbrenner's. And Hal Steinbrenner is extremely loyal to Brian Cashman. Brian Cashman, on balance, those 25 years, they've never had a losing record. They've been to the playoffs in something like 85% of those years. It's hard to argue with that, the bigger picture. But when you burrow down on what's been going on the last few years, not as good. So is there pressure? Pressure in New York from the fans, for sure. Pressure from the owner? I don't know, but my sense is no. And at the same time, Brian Cashman has a lot of pride, and he's going to want to fix this, and he's going to want to get it right. Does he have the wherewithal to do that? Is he savvy enough to do that? Those are all questions that will be asked and should be asked, but I don't see him being in trouble or anything like that. And Boone, it's interesting, AJ. A lot of people have noticed in recent days he looks a little haggard. He's frustrated. He's a little bit more short-tempered, as you said, with reporters than he usually is. But you know how managers work. They're sitting there 24 hours a day trying to figure out how to get things better. And his team is just in the same rut. And I don't know what the answer is. And he's got to be sensing as well, Boone, that his job could be on the line. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe it should be Cashman's job if you're a Yankee fan looking at this objectively, if you're a Yankee executive looking at this objectively. But I don't expect that to be how it works. So we'll see how it goes.
I miss George. I miss George. Can you imagine if George Steinbrenner is still on the Yankees? Not only, dude, he would have fired, rehired Cashman. It would have been like,
it would have been more fun to cover because there would have been a lot more activity.
Well,
and
there
more
was
money.
more urgency. There was more urgency with George. There's no question about that. Now, when you say you miss George, he treated a lot of people badly.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
That part of it we don't miss.
No, yes.
I understand what you're saying. And the one thing that George had that is lacking, not just among the Yankees, but among a lot of teams, is what we discussed earlier. This fierce hunger to win. That's all he cared about. And he would do things that were not necessarily cool to get there, but that drove that organization. And there was a sense of urgency every day. There's a sense of urgency now. It's not the same. It can't be when you don't have, for lack of a better term, a raving lunatic running your team. It's different.
Well spoken. Let's finish with, because our fans are dying for NL West, and I know you wrote about the Dodgers, and I think it's cool actually that the Dodgers have some clear-cut needs. It makes it easier for them to kind of focus on what needs to be done. Let me present one case to you from what I read that you put out in your notes column in The Athletic. The Dodgers have a lot of potential pitching coming back. Kershaw's definitely going to come back. Buehler is a maybe for them. I know you can't totally rely on a young Ryan Pepio, and then there's some relievers that you mentioned like Trinan and JP Fireeyes, and those are, at least you figure a few of those guys are going to help this team down the stretch. So where are you at on NL West / Dodgers here for the trade deadline?
The Dodgers can't count on all that. And certainly some of those pitchers they would hope would come back, but you don't know how effective they're going to be. So I do expect them to be active. And I do expect them to pursue things along the pitching lines. In particular, they've talked about a right-handed bat, not as urgent, in my opinion. They're scoring runs. They're scoring runs at a level that franchise hasn't since 1955. So that part of it's pretty good. But yeah, how do you know that Kershaw's going to stay healthy? How do you know that Pepio comes back? You've got younger pitchers. You might want to back off them as the season goes on. So there's all kinds of things in play. These things suggest that they need help. And I'm not even talking about the bullpen, which has been unsettled at various points this season. So they're going to fire. They're going to do some things. I expect the Giants will do some things too. And the Diamondbacks are not going to sit still. So that's a very interesting division. And we're not even talking about the Padres, who my understanding is at this point they still are looking forward. Still want to build on what they have and not sell. But if they do sell, if they turn around and pivot, they have Snell, they've got Lugo and Hader and possibly Soto. They can do a lot of things. They can basically dominate the deadline. Of course, when you have the payroll that you do, when you've gone all in, when you're drawing 41,000 people a game, you don't want to do that. But if they don't play better, and they have the last two nights in Toronto, that's going to be an option for them.
Oof. Yeah. I mean,
Fascinating. Everyone said it was going to be boring this year, Ken. It's going to be awesome.
It's
It is
never
gonna
boring,
be
AJ.
awesome.
I want
It is
chaos. I want
never
chaos.
boring.
I want
I don't know
chaos.
if we're going to get chaos, but it's going to be interesting.
Yes.
And it's a weird market. It's weird for a lot of reasons. The sport is essentially upside down. We've got teams that we never expected to be playing this well, playing well. We've got teams we thought would be behemoths not playing well. And we have a group of sellers that don't have a lot to offer. So I do expect we'll see a lot of major league from major league type trades where different players are going back and forth as one team tries to fill this need and the other team tries to fill that need. We've seen some trades like that in the recent past. Bader from Montgomery was a good one, right? So there are going to be things that happen. We just don't know to what extent, how it's going to be, but I do expect a level of chaos.
Those are the best trades for the sport, by the way.
Mhm.
Like marketing wise, like Cespedes for Leicester, I was freaking out.
Awesome.
I was like, oh my gosh, well, this
Ken,
came out
get
of
out your
nowhere.
crystal ball. Let's go.
I love it.
Get out your crystal ball and tell us who's
No,
getting
let him
traded.
get some rest. He's got to go. He's got to rest
Nah,
up.
I can't do the crystal ball thing, AJ. That's for others. I got to try to find out what's going on. And
He
that's
gets you, yeah.
challenging enough.
Real text information coming up from Ken.